Okay, good morning. I'm Dr. David A. Padgett, and I've been at Tennessee State University for 20 years. And for most of those years, I've been involved on the ground working with communities in making maps. This first slide is from a project that I'm working on with Dr. Robert Bullard, also known as the father of environmental justice, and Dr. Beverly Wright. We are doing, as part of a larger project, providing technical assistance to vulnerable communities in the Gulf Coast region, doing community asset mapping. So over the years, I've developed a model for community asset mapping for environmental justice stakeholders. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through the steps. When I spent a lot of time mapping pathology early in my career. I'm sure most of us did. I've mapped toxic release inventory sites and asthma. I've mapped toxic release inventory sites and places where we have high rates of infant mortality. I've mapped sinkhole, high propensity for sinkhole formation areas in Florida. Lots of pathology. But asset mapping is when we ask the community, what are the good land uses in our community? How can we replicate them? And in some cases, we have to convince people in these communities, hey, maybe there's something that you think of as being negative that could be positive. So this is in Washington, D.C., in the Buzzard Point neighborhood, a community that's being challenged by gentrification, air pollution, and other things. But we can find ways to, make lemonade out of lemons. So here's a community in Nashville, and we might think of this vacant lot as an eyesore. Maybe it's a place where people who we don't like in our communities might hang out, might not want your children there. And so we might think of a vacant lot or a vacant building as something that's bad. And so oftentimes when we're in these, brainstorming sessions, we ask people, well, maybe these vacant lots can be turned into something. Maybe that can envision a garden there, envision a playground there, envision maybe just some benches where the elders can sit. It doesn't always have to be a rat-infested vacant lot that we don't know what to do with it. High-tech, geographic information systems, global positioning systems, very high-tech stuff. But before we do anything, we take a low-tech walk around our communities. Most of us don't walk. Children don't walk to school. We don't even get up to turn the channels on our TV sets anymore. And so it's amazing. If you just walk through your community, you see so many things that you don't see when you're whizzing by in your automobile. And so we asked people, let's just take a walk. No GPS receivers, no technology. Let's just point out some things that you might consider to be assets. Which is an interesting exercise because we have to have some form of consensus about what an asset is. And that can get to be quite an interesting conversation in our brainstorming meetings. But we have to agree that certain things are assets, and I'll show you exactly what I mean in a minute. This is in the Buzzard Point community in Washington, D.C. Now, when we finally do use the GPS receivers, this is a form that I created where we have several types of assets. I don't have nearly enough time to go through this form, but we are purposefully low tech. We do crowdsourcing by hand. I like to get a lot of young people involved. And so in order to really understand technology, we have to do everything by hand first. I remember a light table. I'm an old geographer now. We had light tables. That's how we made maps a long time ago. Something called a rapidograph pen. Remember, you would pray that thing didn't leak. Remember that? Some people are aging themselves in here now. All that's gone now. But in order for us to really understand where we might make mistakes, we have to do everything by hand in the field. And so, especially when we work with young people. So there I am, I'm some young people showing them a GPS receiver. And in the midst of all this, they get a crash course in geospatial technology. And so oftentimes when we work in communities, we go back, if you notice, don't see a whole lot of young people. And sometimes young people are marginalized when we start to get into our neighborhood organizations and our other community organizations. We have a lot of Gray Panthers out there. And young people are sitting on the sidelines, twiddling their thumbs. But with the technology, we really get them involved. And they're really good at figuring out how these things work. It's amazing how fast these children can figure out how a GPS receiver works. So then we, of course, convert the data into the old Excel spreadsheet to CSV. And so we use ArcGIS Online because it's free. Even I can afford it. And so community organizations can afford it. And very quickly, we can produce asset maps like this one as we walked around the Buzzard Point neighborhood. And this was just an exercise. And notice we have a variety of assets. And we could have gone on. But what was interesting is that the National Stadium, I think it's a baseball team for Washington, D.C., National Stadium, which is here, which is really the main reason why this community is so gentrified. And the gentrification in Buzzard Point, you just have to be on the ground to see, housing projects and then puppies jogging through with poodles all in the same space. It's really just mind-boggling what's happening there. But the people in the community said, no, the National Stadium is an asset because it provides jobs. Me being an outsider, I thought, well, this stadium is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Your neighbor's completely changed because of the stadium. They said, no, our children work there in concession. One person's asset might not be another person's asset, but it's interesting. Here's Gulfport, Mississippi. We did some training there, and you can see sometimes we can't do training at the actual site. So here we are. We found a place where all of our stakeholders could come in the schoolyard, and we had to use our imaginations. And so it was an effective training there. Here is Pensacola, Florida. More training. Now here's a case where they listed a borrow pit as an asset, and now I had to step in and say, no, a borrow pit cannot possibly be an asset, because that's and that's something that we have to communicate when we do asset mapping. We can come back and do pathology mapping later, which is what we usually do. And here's a young African-American male youth organization in Nashville. And so again, working with young people. What young people see as assets is very different than what we see as assets. As you can see, Smoothie King, they saw that as an asset. Jam Coffee House, the school, elementary school. Would you see your elementary school as an asset? Probably not. A long time since elementary school. Story maps are a really good template, and a lot of communities ask about doing story maps because they oftentimes, ArcGIS by itself kind of limits what you can do without pop-ups, and pop-ups are really kind of clunky to do in ArcGIS Online, but with the template with story maps, okay, he's standing up now. Okay, I better finish. And also we have lots of tools out there, EJ Screen and ToxMap and others that communities can use for free and make maps on their own. There's lots of them out there. And Envirofacts. And thank you very much.